Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 3, Episode 24, entitled Shakaar. This episode aired May 22nd, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous episode, Explorers?
No, that one was perfect.
It was the one where Sisko took his kid on a mortally dangerous trip, but somehow came off as the greatest dad ever?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Even in interstellar sailing craft, there seems to be a lot of winding of handles.
Yeah, lots of cranks to turn.
Yeah.
Okay, well, are we ready to talk about this one?
Absolutely.
I was anxious to find out what Shakaar meant. So in the cold open, Sisko and Miles are playing darts and quarks, and Miles says he's in the zone, and he can't miss, which seems to be true.
And if you notice, at 0:30, right behind Miles's head, we briefly see Morn walk left to right off screen. You really had to search for him there. This is where high def would be really useful.
Yeah, I didn't even see him. So when the dartboard first appeared in that episode Visionary, was it electronic then?
Yes.
I
went back and
forgotten. Checked. Oh, okay, I'm glad you checked.
Because they were playing in the cargo bay.
Right. Well, Sisko gets a call from the Bajoran Provisional Government.
Drink!
And he has to abandon the game. Meanwhile, in Kira's quarters, she is praying in front of a small table with a flame at the center of it. She later calls it a Duranya, a lamp for the dead. She's speaking Bajoran, but in the middle of this prayer, she says Bareil's name. So it's nice to see that she hasn't forgotten him. Though this is the first time we've heard his name since he died like 11 episodes ago.
Yes.
Sisko arrives to deliver some news. The first minister of the provisional government, Drink, has died of heart failure, and a new head has been appointed. He wanted to be the one to tell her because the new head is Kai Winn. And we cue the theme song.
I feel Sisko didn't point out that even though they're in space and there's vacuum between Bajoran and the station, you could still hear the cry from Jarrow Essa shouting, "No!" Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Now, do you think that Sisko wanted to deliver this message himself because he wanted to see the shocked look on her face, or because he thought that maybe she'd punch the messenger if it was anybody else?
Yes. I assume that it is because of that relationship between the two of them that he would come to Kira to deliver what is essentially very bad news, not just for Kira, but for Sisko, because the two of them know what an operator Winn is.
Yeah. I think my boss would have done the same thing in this kind of a situation. I believe he would have delivered this kind of news to me as well, to allow me to have a reaction
well,
that nobody else would have to see.
Right. This is something that obviously must have shaken Kira's faith and potentially put Sisko at risk as well. Because remember, he was the one who jumped on the shooter to stop her.
Oh, right. Yeah. The slow motion, motion dive. Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was a whole season ago.
This is not good for either of them.
Well, we had 3 provisional governments before the theme song. That was very exciting. God, we haven't heard that in ages.
We're just throwing them in here. This is great.
Did they ever get an actual government, or is it provisional for the entire length of the series?
You will have to wait and see.
I think I asked that question before and got the same answer. After we come back from the theme song, Odo is giving Kira some kind of security status report, and she's not paying any attention to him. She's distracted by learning that Kai Winn is running the government. She says no one is even opposing her in the elections. She'll be the minister for 6 years, and nobody seems to care. Odo says not everyone has this personal connection to what evil Winn has done, which is certainly true.
Yeah.
He points out that on Bajor, they admire her as the woman who forged a peace treaty with Cardassia, even though the two of them know Bareil was the one responsible for that.
Oh, I think it could be argued that she is wholly responsible for Bareil's death.
I'm not sure wholly is the right word, because he really did do everything that he could to make it happen. He put his own health and well-being second, and he probably would have had a real crisis, emotionally, if somebody had forced him not to do that, or if somebody had forced him to go into stasis, which is what Julian wanted to do. But actually, that would have made maybe a more interesting story between Bareil and Kira as it went forward.
Oh, like he was unable to make that call.
Exactly.
And Kira did it, and the effect that could have on the relationship.
But as you and I like to say, the sheriff had to die.
Oh.
There are just times where the character has to die in a story, or
Yeah.
has to be gone in some way. And I think Bareil needed to go because there
Right.
was really no other easy way to get out of that storyline, and they needed to move on from it.
Even if it was bad for Kira.
Exactly. Kira doesn't get why people can't see that Kai Winn is really just power hungry. She doesn't get how after fighting the Cardassians for their freedom, they'd hand it over to Winn. Odo says the problem with freedom of choice is that people sometimes make the wrong choice. I love that line.
Isn't that the truth?
And it's also so Odo. It's just great.
It does fit Odo's worldview.
Absolutely.
Also, my suspicions were completely correct.
Of what?
Winn is taking all the credit for the treaty that she personally negotiated without any help.
We are going to talk about that a little bit more. So now we're back to the Lamp of the Dead, and this time Kai Winn rings the bell and enters her quarters. She looks at the lamp and she asks if Kira has suffered a recent loss.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
this broad is cold. She's shocked that Kira is still mourning Bareil as he died 3 whole months ago.
Oh, wow.
God. She's moved on. She's like, I'm done with him. He's dead.
Winn moves on from a loss or a tragedy the second she steps over the body after she stabbed the person in the back.
Well,
Winn is then over it.
if she's a sociopath, it would make sense that she wouldn't understand this at all.
Oh, that's true.
Well, Kira pokes at her for taking credit for the peace treaty, but Winn is like, Bareil saw his role as carrying out the will of the prophets.
Ugh.
Achieving peace was its own reward. He never wanted fame or glory for what he did. She's like, I'm surprised you didn't know that. And Kira has to control her rage. And she asks why Winn has come.
Yeah, she says, as someone who loved him, I'm surprised you didn't know that.
Oh my gosh. It was quite a scene. Oh, this whole scene was great. Well, look, anytime Kai Winn is involved, it's an amazing scene. She's a terrible person, but she's such a great character. And this actress is so incredible.
Yes.
Every time she's in these episodes, I struggle with not writing down every single thing she says because I'm just so enamored with her and she just holds my attention. I can't look away.
From both a writing and a viewing standpoint, she is just this wonderful case study in awful. And her ability to use words as weapons is breathtaking. She is just brutal in the things that she says.
Oh, yeah, totally.
From the way they portray the character, it's like she is able to think these things up on the spot.
I think that's true. She has a certain kind of defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And it's really easy for her to just pull these out of the air.
I also think it shows that this evolution of Kira, that she didn't rise to very obvious bait here.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, this is a definite change.
She very quietly and calmly pulls out the chair.
Right, and invites her to sit down. Yep. She's learning. So Winn tells a story about Rakantha province, a once fertile agricultural region where the farmlands were poisoned by the Cardassians, leaving it a barren wasteland. The Cardassians just leave love in their wake.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But now, after years of research, the Agricultural Ministry has developed reclamators that can detoxify soil. If they could return to farming in 6 months, planting season would begin and they could be producing goods for export, attracting interstellar commerce to Bajor and enhancing their application for membership in the Federation. But a group of farmers in another province were allowed to use the reclamators, and now they're refusing to return them. Winn has come to Kira because these farmers are in Dakhur province, which is Kira's home, and also because they're led by a man named Shakaar, who was the leader of Kira's resistance cell during the occupation. She wants Kira to convince Shakaar to return the stolen equipment. Kira says, "You want me to go up against a man who saved my life countless times for you?" And Winn, with her evil tone, says, "Not for me, child, for Bajor." I love it.
Kira at this point should say, I bet this is the same line of BS you fed to Bareil.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. She hopes that they can put their differences aside for the sake of the Bajoran people, because Bajor is on the verge of a new era. She claims Shakaar has stolen this equipment and he's only thinking of himself. Kira is pretty sure this isn't true because she knows Shakaar to be selfless. But this is why Winn has come to her. She wants it settled quickly. So Kira agrees to talk to him.
Oh, that part where she says, we must all act for the common good of Bajor. I love how Winn, she leans in close to say this to Kira.
Yes.
Like she's sharing a secret with her.
Absolutely.
It's the way Louise Fletcher can use subtle body language to really enhance this role.
I don't know what it is about her. She just embodies this character so brilliantly, so believably, even though the woman she's awful, right? What she does. There's something so endearing about her. I am just completely attracted to her. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I don't like the way we treat Kira. I mean, she is the constant recipient of emotional blackmail from people from Bajoran. Yeah. They take advantage of her sincerity and her passion for her cause, right? It's so irritating.
It's because Kira is the character who is truly pure of heart.
She's almost like the Boy Scout who will do the right thing.
Oh.
You know, and I use that as an archetype, not as an actual comparison to a Boy Scout. Well, now we go to a very dry, very hilly set that looks like a farm in the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. And she finds her friend Shakaar in this little shack of a farm, and they hug. And the top of her head comes to the bottom of his chin. He is very tall, and he has some serious 90s hair.
Oh, he is a huge dude as well.
Yeah, he is a huge, good-looking dude. The inside of this shack looks a lot like Brian Keith's house in Progress. I think they maybe used the same one.
Ah.
But anyway, he tells her that he's aware of her posting on DS9, and he says she should be very proud. They talk about some people named Pharrell and Lupaza who have farms nearby, which really seems to shock Kira. Then Kira gets serious and says they need to talk. Shakaar says he knows why she's there, and he needs time to think about it.
I think this design aesthetic is high-tech rustic. Obviously, they're trying to make it look very rural, very sort of almost the stereotype of a backwoods shack. And then they have this high-tech equipment inside.
Well, but also maybe people who've never been on an actual farm. I mean, people just live in normal houses on farms. You know, I have many relatives who lived on farms, and I've been on many farms in my life, and it's just a house next to fields. It's not these little dumpy shacks all the time that they seem to have on these shows. Like, that's somehow a farm. And what's also funny is the outside of it, I mean, it looks like a movie set. It's very fake. It's this really rundown shack and random equipment that you wouldn't really have in the future, I don't think, you know, sort of strewn around. But then you go inside, and somehow the inside of the shack is kind of perfect. There's nothing run down inside. And yes, they have electronic equipment to show you that, you know, they're not actually in the 30s, but they're in the future on Bajoran.
That's why I'm thinking this is a design aesthetic. He has an interior designer who comes around with the cleaner and makes sure everything is in its right place. And
definitely somebody to come and make his clothes, which are perfect.
Oh, yeah, and the hairdresser.
He's got the farmer chic designer making his clothing. Perfectly fitted clothing. But so here we should also talk about the actor playing Shakaar, since we've been picking on his appearance a little bit. His name is Duncan Regehr, and according to IMDb, he was a champion figure skater and an Olympic boxing contender and a Shakespearean-trained stage performer. I mean, these things already make him very interesting. They're not normally three things that go together. But let's not forget the most important thing that he did. He also played Ronan in Sub Rosa, an infamous TNG episode where Dr. Crusher has sex with a candle.
No, not that episode.
He's the candle guy.
Oh, really?
Yes, and as soon as I realized that, I couldn't not see it for the whole episode.
Oh, that episode is truly one of the weirdest.
It's very weird. But anyway, now he's a farmer. Well, we go back to our B story about Miles being in the zone of dart throwing. And Quark is taking bets now on him and expects him back tomorrow. But Miles is thinking maybe he'll go kayaking in the holosuites instead. Quark doesn't want him to hurt his golden shoulder. He manages to persuade Miles, who then tells him that maybe he should up the odds. I think he said he was giving 10-1 odds.
Yes.
And Miles says to give him maybe 15.
In this scene, we also see some more of Morn hanging out in the background.
Okay.
I would expect this kind of behavior from Quark.
Well, sure.
Him trying to turn a profit and bet on this. But also, Quark knows Miles doesn't really like him.
So it's a high-risk thing.
Right.
Quark isn't very smart about stuff like this.
Don't you think Miles wouldn't hesitate to throw a game? Given that we've established Miles has kind of an evil sense of humor.
Absolutely. Yes, this is a very Quark move.
But winning 47 games in a row, that is pretty good.
I would have been very curious to see if those purple luck balls had returned to the station.
Oh, maybe someone was keeping one somewhere.
Well, especially when he kept hitting the bullseye. I mean, that's not really normal. You would have to practice so much.
True.
And he's got a job. Maybe this is all he does in the evenings with Keiko not on the station.
Oh, just plays darts.
Maybe that's why he and Quark are bonding, because he's just in Quarks all the time.
Oh, right. Yeah, he just drinks and plays darts. That's a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, that's great. He should go back to playing racquetball, probably with Bashir.
Well, we could have some more episodes with Julian wearing his ridiculous outfit.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about that. His leotard. Well, back down to the shack, and we meet the other friends that we were talking about earlier, and we're drinking and laughing about the old days of fighting the Cardassians.
Which at this point was only really 3 years ago.
Yeah. Pharrell is missing an arm, and Kira asks why he never replaced it. He tells a story about asking the prophets for strength before storming an interrogation center to rescue the rest of them. In exchange, he said he'd give up his life, but he was able to rescue all of them, and it only cost him an arm. The prophets were generous, and replacing the arm would seem ungrateful. I felt like this was piling a little bit of guilt onto Kira, but it was such an interesting story. And obviously, they're trying to paint a picture of what these folks are like.
About the bond between them and the level of honor that they have within their group.
The nobility, really, of the group. And they stick with that the entire episode, and they never falter with that sort of the noble cause gene that they all seem to have. But when they find out why Kira is there, they all assume that the Reclamators are going to stay with them. They think Kira will just tell the Kai to forget it. So later that night, Kira and Shakaar are standing out on his porch, and Kira asks him to reconsider about the Reclamators and do what's best for Bajor. He says they waited 3 years to get the equipment, and now they have them, and they were supposed to get to keep them for a year. But then the guy who made that promise died. I guess that was the head of the government.
Yeah.
And now the government wants them back. Kira makes the pitch about exporting goods and making Bajor appear stronger, but Shakaar just doesn't care about any of that. He's just trying to feed his own people. I will say he does look pretty healthy, and so did his friends. I mean, nobody in this group is starving. These are some good-looking actors. They don't look like poor starving farmers. Well, anyway, Kira wonders if there's a compromise that he could reach with the Kai. He agrees to talk, but he's pretty skeptical. He says he'll do it for her, and then he hugs her again. They're very cute friends.
Kira does make a good point here. The Bajorans have lost so much, regaining something of a sense of pride.
Right.
I could see her wanting to do that. Maybe this is part of getting that respect back.
If Kira took the Gallup StrengthsFinder test, she would have belief in her top 5. She believes in a cause, whatever that cause is, and then she will do everything to make that happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that a person is religious. It means that they're driven and motivated by something that they will make inherently important to themselves.
Yeah.
And I can see that, she came around to this. At first, I don't think she was so sure. And now she's trying to sell that belief to someone else.
Yeah. Typically, this is the kind of thing that somebody awful like Winn would exploit.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the same way she did that to Neela.
Because Neela had it too, in a slightly different way, but yes. So now Kira goes to talk to Winn, and she tells her that the Reclamators will be returned in 6 months. But Winn is like, the planting season in Rakantha will be over in 6 months, which is, by the way, not what she says at the beginning of the episode. She actually says 6 months is the beginning of the planting season. But anyway, she's annoyed. Kira tells her that she's arranged a meeting between Winn and Shakaar to work out a compromise. Winn thinks Shakaar sounds prideful and arrogant, and there's no reasoning with him.
Oh, a bit of projection there, Winn.
Yeah, it's such a funny assessment of someone she's never bothered to meet. It's like, he should do what I say because I'm in charge, which is, always the best way to get something out of a person. We talked about this before, but I'm telling you, she has no skills except for, I told you to do it and you won't do it, so you must be killed. That's her only, that's her only skill that she has.
I have a comment on that later.
Okay. So the Kai tells Kira to tell Shakaar she'll meet with him. And then she tells Kira to go back to Deep Space Nine and give her regards to Commander Sisko.
Notice that. She says Commander Sisko, not the emissary.
Yep.
This is so typical of her. I think Kira should have thrown back in her face, oh, you mean the emissary?
She should have.
Winn is so willing to call Sisko the emissary when it's in her favor or for her benefit.
Yeah. Also, I thought it was very telling here that she didn't say she would meet with Shakaar. She said that Kira could tell him that she would meet with him.
Oh, I did not notice that.
A little bit of a play on words there.
Ooh, playing word games.
Because then we go back to the farm, and Kira is telling Shakaar that the Kai will talk to him, but the doorbell rings, and it turns out that the Kai isn't coming. Instead, she sent some goons to arrest Shakaar. Kira is somehow surprised that Winn lied again.
Yeah, a shocked Kira says, she lied.
Yes.
And
Shakar's like, that's what she does.
Really? The woman who had underlings plant bombs and attempt to murder people for her would lie?
She keeps wanting to believe in Winn, and it just never works out.
I'm conflicted about that. Given her background and personal experience with Winn, would she be taken in? Or is this new look from Winn totally fooling Kira?
It's the belief strength.
Ah.
She wants to believe this so much, and she's motivated by that belief. So it's confusing to her when someone else isn't.
Okay.
But I'll be shocked if she continues to believe everything that comes out of that woman's mouth from here.
I guess then she hasn't reached that point. She wants to believe the best.
I think we all knew what was coming in this scene. Shakaar punches one of the guards and knocks him out, as Kira does the same to the other guard. They grab the phasers, and then Kira says, we have to get out of here. Shakaar stops her, and he tries to give her an out, saying she can still explain this away. But she says she's sick of the lies coming from Winn, which is good. She's finally sick of it, and she's going with him.
I like when he tells her to go home, and she just replies with, I am home.
Yep.
Kira is drawing a line in the sand.
Well, she did the same thing in progress. It's like she gets involved in something, and she's like, oh, no, I'm here. I'm part of this now. The belief comes out.
That's true.
Now we're in a cave with the other farmers.
Oh, so this must be important then.
Yes, or the former resistance fighters. They're reverting to their old ways of arming up. There's a province-wide alert for the arrest of Shakaar and Kira, and the surrounding towns were asked to send in troops to help with the search. Shakaar's farm has been seized, and they're scanning for the reclamators. But Shakaar says they'll never find them. I wonder where they are. We never even see them.
Maybe they put some kind of dampening field around them so they'd never find them.
I don't know, because there was like some big weird piece of equipment right in front of the shack when Kira gets there. And I thought, is that the reclamator? But if they were going to look for it, it was right there. So that must not have been it. But they never show them or talk about them. So I don't know where he's hiding them, if they're in this cave or what. But yeah, they do have equipment to dampen sensors. So perhaps he's just hidden it.
Right.
Well, the plan is to get everyone moving and run the civil police ragged, chasing them through the mountains, which sounds like a very exhausting plan with no real endgame. Shakaar says the Cardassians chased them in the mountains for 10 years and never caught them. But Kira points out that some of the civil police used to be resistance fighters too, and they're not likely to give up. Shakaar isn't sure that they're going to be so keen to hunt down fellow Bajorans just trying to defend their homes.
Taking an awfully big risk there.
He really is. They head out to rendezvous with some of the other farmers and move further into the hills.
I like with these characters how, when it comes to a push, the bond comes back.
Yeah.
How they drop straight back into their resistance ways.
We go back to Quark's, and Miles is still throwing bullseyes. He's playing against a very droll Vulcan in a Starfleet uniform that I don't think we've seen before. And Miles is getting cocky, so you know he's about to have a fall. Quark hands him a synth ale, and when Miles reaches back for it, he cries out in pain. And Julian says he's dislocated his shoulder. Ow, been there, done that. That hurts a lot.
That was not a pleasant experience to witness.
No, and you've seen a shoulder not in its socket. Is that what it looks like? Miles, who just had his shoulder up in the air, like somehow that was dislocated.
No.
Well, anyway, Julian says he also has a rotator cuff tear and severe degenerative damage, and he needs surgery. The Vulcan says the rules are if he leaves the game, he forfeits. So Miles tries to throw a dart, but obviously he can't. So Quark gets stuck with some bets that he has to pay off.
Yes.
At 15-1.
Quick question here.
Yeah?
Why would you allow a Vulcan to play Miles? I thought Vulcans had much higher visual acuity and motor skills were more advanced than humans.
I don't know. I guess a game of skill with no practice. Maybe you still have an advantage.
Yeah.
At least for a while. It's kind of like when you and I play video games. I have an advantage for the first 2 or 3 games. For some reason, I can pick the game up faster, but then once you figure it out, I'll never beat you again. You can play it 1,000 times and I'll never win again.
Apart from biplanes.
Yes, there was the Intellivision game Biplanes that I have a weird affinity for and no one can beat me at.
Although House of the Dead with Kim is a lot of fun. She headshots every zombie.
Oh, you can't win that game if you don't headshot. Now we go down to Kai Wynn's office, and she's called Cisco for help. It's been 2 weeks since she sent the militia into Dakar province, and they've been unable to catch Shakaar or any of his followers.
Notice when he comes in, she says, "Emissary, I'm so happy you came to consult with me."
She does.
So it's all emissary now, is it?
She says she's embarrassed to say that Shakaar's defiance is catching on in the other provinces. I think this is very meaningful in that she's more concerned about how everything makes her look than she is about anything else.
Yes. And when Sisko says, I guess you must know how the Cardassians felt, I feel that was a really serious dig at her.
That was quite a dig.
But she just seems to shake it off. She is so hard to rattle.
Definitely. Sisko is aware that she's declared martial law and suspended local governments in the Hill provinces. He's also heard that Shakaar is gaining popularity all over the planet, not just in the surrounding provinces. So Winn goes into her cold, unsmiling mode and asks if he heard that from Major Kira. But Sisko hasn't heard from Kira in weeks.
I thought it was strange that Winn would say, I wasn't aware you kept such a close watch on the Bajoran political situation. I'm fairly sure that's a big part of Sisko's job.
His job, yeah.
Or was that kind of a dig at Sisko?
It's one of those things she said through gritted teeth.
Yeah.
She knows what she's doing, but I think what she's really trying to say is, this is none of your business.
Okay, this is her using words that don't quite mean what I think they mean.
Exactly. Sisko advises that she withdraw the troops from Dakar province. She says she'll do that, but only if Sisko provides a Federation security force to find Shakaar.
Wow.
She says such an act would solidify the relations between the Federation and Bajor, even though Sisko's like, I didn't know we needed to solidify the relations between the Federation and Bajor.
Oh, that look on Sisko's face. She wants someone else to do the dirty work for her.
Always. But Sisko says that Federation law prevents him from interfering in Bajoran internal affairs.
Nicely done.
And the music swells as she stands up saying, so you're refusing my request for aid? And Sisko's like, I suppose I am. She says if Bajor can't depend on the Federation, they'll withdraw their application for membership. Sisko says that's an overreaction, much like her entire response to this crisis. Using a militia against your own people risks a civil war over some farming equipment. But that's just not the point with her. I mean, the point is she wants to be the hero and be the face of a big success. She doesn't care about anything else.
Yeah, he totally calls her out. I mean, she really is risking civil war.
Yeah, over these two reclamators.
Yeah, and I think the wording here is very telling. She uses the phrase defiance and defy, and I think this is one of her blind spots. People under her control within the religious orders either do what she says or they're out. She can excommunicate them, do whatever they do in the Bajoran faith. This is something new, the civilian government, and she's trying to transfer that level of control she's had over to the civilian government.
She can't always answer with, but this is what the prophets want. Well, Winn claims it's not just about the reclamators, it's about the future of society. When someone like Shakaar is above the law, we risk descending into anarchy and chaos.
But when the Kai or Vedic Winn does things that are against the law, then that's okay.
Because it's what the prophets want.
That's what I was going to ask. Is she deceiving herself about the things that she did? Or is she just so full of her own self-righteousness that for her defying the law and even the rules of normal society is always justified because I'm fulfilling the will of the prophets?
Yes, this is the problem with hypocrites. They will find something to explain away what they've done and to put it on the shoulders of someone else.
Ooh, nice.
She is constantly using the prophets as an excuse for her own bad behavior.
Yeah.
Either by getting someone else to do something bad and then saying it's what the prophets wanted, or whatever she has done or decision she has made as being the will of the prophets.
Yeah.
So she's a complete hypocrite. And it works in religion, unfortunately. Yeah. And I guess, sadly, it also works in politics. But she's trying to use that same tactic in a new role. And it's interesting to me here that she thinks that this is a test by the prophets to see if she's worthy of this new role and also of being the Kai. I just think that is so telling about everything about her.
Do you think that's genuine?
Well, yes, in the way that it can be genuine for her.
That she really believes this is a test by the prophets. She's just not using that as a motif in front of Sisko.
I do think she thinks it's a test by the prophets, but I also think that no matter what happens, she's going to say that this is what the prophets wanted.
Yeah.
And so, she's going to continue to be a hypocrite about it. Do you know what I mean? She's telling herself a story.
Yes, I totally get what you mean. I guess this is an example of something we brought up before. This is what Sisko said of, at some point, you'll feel the hand of God on your shoulder.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she says that she intends to stop Shakaar by any means necessary, which is very ominous.
Oh.
So now we go to Shakaar, Kira, and all the farmers, and they're running through some very steep terrain as soldiers chase after them. They hide behind some rocks as Kira messes with a piece of equipment that's meant to send out false sensor readings. Shakaar and Kira talk about how half of the militia is from the same province, and they know the terrain just as well as they do. Pharrell, the big guy with the missing arm, he suggests they turn and fight instead of running. But Shakaar is worried that they'll be the ones who suffer. So they decide to head into a canyon where they'll ambush the militia, which reminded me of the second Lord of the Rings movie. It's the Battle of Helm's Deep. Back ourselves into a corner and hope not to die. And hope the elves save you.
Oh, good reference. I like that one.
So into the canyon we go, and the farmers are all up on the ridge with weapons pointed at the militia. They recognize the leader of the militia from one of the other resistance cells, and Kira says she met him at a reception in the capital about a year ago. They aim their guns to fire, but ultimately can't fire on their own people.
This was a good strategy. They were planning to take out the leadership of the group, shoot the lieutenant, the colonel in charge. I'm guessing a lot of this is almost automatic. Taking this approach and what to do is so natural for them. You can almost do it without thinking.
Yeah, it's a good plan because they tricked them into thinking that they've gotten farther ahead, and so they took a shortcut through this canyon, and now they've got them cornered, and they're going to take out the leadership.
But it was fascinating that they had everything lined up to take the shot. They were ready to go. And both Shakaar and Kira at the same time looked down.
They couldn't do it.
And are like, hey, I can't do this.
It was very dramatic. They had dramatic music playing and they did extreme close-ups. And then the two of them both went, can't do it.
And you knew something had changed when she says, I'm sorry. And Shakaar says, don't be, I can't either.
Yeah. They decide instead to drop their weapons and come down the ridge to talk to the leader dude. When Kira says her name, the leader thanks her for liberating Galatep, where his brother was. And then he says he assumes, based on their calm demeanor, that he's probably walked into an ambush. Shakaar and the leader of the militia reminisce about Cardassian battles. Shakaar says he wants to take his people out of here and just go home. And just then, one of the militia sees movement along the ridge and he fires. Shakaar and Kira and the leader of this group raise their hands and shout for everyone not to fire in a panic. Nobody gets hurt and the shooting stops. Kira says they need to find a way to end this without more shooting because it's going to be the start of a civil war. Shakaar says he didn't fight Cardassians for 25 years so that he could end up shooting Bajorans. The militia leader agrees.
Yes, because the colonel says, you want to walk out of here, you know that's impossible. And Kira tells him, you better find a way to make it possible because the next time we won't be able to stop the shooting. Right. We're talking about the start of a civil war. Kira seems to have a complete understanding of the bigger picture here. And I find that kind of interesting that she, compared to the others around her, Shakaar, this colonel, she seems to have a better understanding of what this is going to end up with. Do you think they're kind of focused on the tactical and Kira has learned more about looking at the strategic?
Yeah, possibly. I think she's seen a lot over the last couple of years on Deep Space Nine. Like if we looked at the 3 episodes at the start of season 2, I think she learned a lot there about Bajorans fighting Bajorans.
Right.
She saw that nearly happen.
Yes.
And so I think she's maybe got the front row seat to something like that already.
Yeah.
So now she's kind of sharing that wisdom here with Shakaar and the colonel.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Although I'm going to have to point out, Shakaar must have some kind of amazing hygiene routine. Because if you look at the colonel and his troops, he's got like messed up hair and he's got a little dirt in his face and the other guys are looking all grubby and even Kira's looking a little bit scuffed
Kira's
up.
Definitely ruffled and dirty. Mm-hmm.
And Shakaar is perfect. Not a mark on him. Still the perfect hair, perfect skin. Clothes are immaculate.
He's still the ghost from TNG. Dirt can't touch him.
Oh.
But I thought the same thing. He's standing there still looking perfect, right? He's like the supermodel.
Yeah.
Everybody else looks like they've been crawling in the dirt.
Right. And I'm wondering if that was a deliberate directing or writing decision to make everyone else look like they've been crawling around in the hills. They're tired.
Maybe.
They're sweaty. And you've got this character, Shakaar, who's almost larger than life, literally.
Yeah.
Looking still perfect and in one piece and well kempt. So you're making that sort of distinction of this is not just an ordinary guy.
Yeah, maybe. So now we go back to Kaiwin's office and the militia leader comes in with Shakaar and Kira.
Linares is his name.
She's thrilled to see this until the colonel says that they're not his prisoners. Shakaar says he's come to enter the election for the office of First Minister. Kaiwin says he has an interesting sense of humor, and she is mad in this scene. The colonel says the other army commanders are in full support of Shakaar, and Kira gloats a little about this. Winn says it's a coup, but Kira's like, no, it's a free election. You can run if you want, but when everyone knows the real facts about what you did here, you will lose the election and lose everyone's trust. She steps in a few steps towards the Kai and she says, if I were you, I'd start packing. And Winn sets her jaw in anger as the music builds.
Kira throws that anger right back at her. It's a great scene.
Yeah.
The Kai has so overplayed this to the extreme.
Yeah.
She's even lost support of the army. I think at this point, and this would be my advice to Winn, she should step back and start shouting blasphemy at all of them and threaten to excommunicate
She hasn't
them.
done that in a long time. Blasphemy. Well, it's so interesting to me that she would even get this role. She barely knows how to be the Kai. She has no ability to show leadership in that situation, but at least she can bluff her way through by saying the prophets told me to do it. But just putting that person into this kind of a leadership role where she has no idea what to do, why would you do that? I mean, do they really not have any other candidates? Or I guess more likely she was guilting them all into it because she's so power hungry.
Yes, and I would also guess that she would play up her role in the peace treaty to the extreme.
Oh, right. Or even if she didn't play it up, but they assumed that she had done it. So she was showing that she had political chops.
That's
even
true.
though she didn't, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we go back to Quark's now, and Miles has a new shoulder, but he's lost the zone. But Bashir manages to make a bullseye, so now Quark thinks maybe he's in the zone. It's such a silly little B story.
Yes, it is.
But then we go to Kira's quarters, and Sisko is asking if any other candidates have entered the election. She says Shakaar is pretty unbeatable, and the Kai even put out a statement of support for him. I mean, she's always going to want to be seen as backing a winner to keep herself in the public eye.
You gotta love that ability to pivot.
Absolutely.
No, child, you were mistaken. I have always supported Shakaar.
Yes.
Oh, no, we had a disagreement about policy in the past. We didn't come to conflict.
Right. But once we talked, we realized that we had more in common.
Precisely.
So Kira's back is a little stiff from sleeping on the ground, and she's glad to be back on the station. After Sisko leaves, she blows out the flame on the death lamp, so I guess we're over Bareil officially now.
Oh.
Yeah.
I felt bad about that. It was a very symbolic move.
It was, but
the time for mourning Bareil was over.
I wish they had shown it more. I wish,
Yeah.
at the end of every episode they had shown it or something so that we knew that it was going on.
Yeah.
Instead of they show it once 11 episodes after he died and then boom, it's over.
Yeah.
That's a little frustrating and sad, but also that's the way of the episodic show.
Yeah.
Well, this is the end of the episode. So do you have any over analysis?
Oh, just a couple of things. Maybe.
All right.
I think I'm going to start off with the B story. Did Miles really hurt his shoulder?
Yeah, I wondered that too. I thought for sure he was faking it. So the whole thing might have been fake. Even him throwing the dart and not hitting the bullseye might have been fake. I don't know. It's a good question.
I'm going with it's a fake because we know Miles has a wicked sense of humor. And when he says to Quark, oh, you should put it up to 15, and then this happens. And I think the way Julian almost does it over dramatically of, oh, you've damaged it this time, and oh, we'll need to do surgery.
Dislocated.
And the way Miles reacts is like, surgery? To me, that seems like it was Julian, hamming it up for the people in the bar.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards, I think it was all fake. And I'm expecting after this, Miles and Julian having a drink, laughing their head off about this.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Would not surprise me.
Next one.
Yeah.
And this is about Winn. I think that she is prepared to learn from experience. She's prepared to bury mistakes, but not forget them. I have a theory that maybe she learned enough from Jarrow and from experience in the peace negotiations, how to turn those skills or that experience into civilian political government practice. So she got into this position of First Minister by leveraging things that she'd witnessed or learned from these two previous experiences.
She probably thinks so, even if it's not true. But yeah, that's an interesting take.
But at the end of the day, her base instincts of requiring obedience from all underlings just doesn't work. having that person in civilian
No.
government is not a good idea unless they have complete authoritarian control.
Yeah, these kind of leaders would want total control over people, hearts and minds.
Yes.
And you can't do that unless you have some kind of militia that's really going to make it happen. And
Yeah.
I think she thought she did have that. But oops, no, you definitely don't have that.
Yeah, I think that's the most telling part of this episode, that the Bajoran armies, the militia, are not prepared to stand
Right.
behind the leader regardless.
Yep.
And that's
Definitely.
probably a good thing for Bajoran.
Yeah, probably. But it's also probably why they still have just a provisional government and not a full-blown government.
They haven't held full elections yet, I guess.
Yeah.
Next thing,
Mm-hmm.
I loved Winn trying to shift the blame of everything to the Federation, of making her will being enforced a Federation action. So if
Yeah.
anything went wrong,
Yeah.
she could back off and go, well, it wasn't me, it was the Federation. They overstepped the line.
Yeah. She was totally ready to do that. The thing is, though, if you play all your cards, you end up with no cards. You got to be a little bit cautious, but she was ready to play all the cards in this episode.
I think because she was making a gamble.
Yeah.
She already knew that if she didn't win this, then she was going to lose being the first minister. And I think when she was at that point, she was going to roll for a 6.
Yeah, because she was so stuck again on being more obsessed with how it looks than really what was happening, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that she was just willing to throw everything out the window with the Federation, then she could
Yes.
blame them and she could look like, oh, I had to do that because they were not willing to help us. And if we become part of the Federation, they're not willing to help us. What is the point?
Right.
Although, geez, are you ready for the argument after that? It's like, well, then who is going to help us? Because it's not the Cardassians.
Oh, I'm sure the Cardassians would help.
Maybe she thinks that.
Just a small force to help keep the peace.
Mm.
Hey, Ducat would totally be behind that.
Yeah, he'd turn up with some troops.
And I think my final point, so these resistance groups,
Yeah.
one of the things I think you would have on Bajoran is an awful lot of people who had experience in resistance fighting and opposing the government and waging these long guerrilla campaigns against the authorities. I would worry about the stability of Bajoran. Every time you got into a major project or something that upset a significant portion of a particular community, let's say, there was a dam project or something that would, like the Moon project where they needed to generate power, that a part of the people who would oppose it, maybe their first reaction would be, oh, we go back to fighting the government in caves and shooting soldiers and things like that. And the destabilizing effects that it would have on society if every time something they didn't like happened, okay, we're back to the caves and shooting at the government.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless the Bajorans are really united, I would see there would be factions of people if that would be their first reaction.
Well, I hope that this provisional government is actually working towards a stable long-term government that gives voices to people in all of the provinces in some way. I mean, they talked about there being local governments. So, somehow these local governments need to turn into a larger government. I hope they're working towards that. It doesn't seem like it since they're putting the Kai in charge. I mean, she has no idea what she's doing, but also, is that what you have decided to do, that the religion is going to run the planet? I always fall back to, is there really only one religion on the entire planet? That seems a little bit crazy, but I hope they're working towards a long-term solution to that. Otherwise, they are going to have this instability forever.
Right. And I think that is what's happening with this election. That it's still only 3 years since the invasion ended. This is probably the first full true election across the planet.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
And I think that wraps it up for me.
Well, I have a couple of things in
Okay.
overanalysis.
Go for it.
One is that I've worked with people who were so stuck in their image and they didn't really have the skills for the job that they were in.
Yeah.
And everything they did was about maintaining that image and maintaining control. And they were just never willing to say that they didn't know something or to be seen as making a mistake. And these people somehow do end up in leadership positions, and they're horrible in those positions. And sometimes they're there for a long time because they are able to control some people and control some situations, but it's really to the detriment of the larger organization over time.
Yeah.
So I kept thinking about some of these people that I've known in my lifetime while I'm watching the Kai. I find her just such a fascinating character because of that, because I can draw parallels to people in real life. And what I think TV isn't always great at, or not just TV, but maybe fiction in general, isn't always great at, is creating characters who have flaws. They're not just all good or all bad. You know, they have these realistic flaws. And to me, this is kind of a realistic flaw. You know, she was unable to perform the tasks of Kai, as we talked about back in that episode, Life Support.
Yeah.
And I think that that comes out here even larger. She has no idea how to do this bigger job, but she's convinced herself it's what the prophets want for her.
Her ambition is far greater than her skill set.
Exactly. And I have known so many people like that, where it wasn't the prophets telling them that, but maybe it was some terrible boss that they had, you know, that kind of got them into that situation. So my overanalysis there is I find this very relatable and very interesting.
Kai Winn is a realistic character in a lot of ways, in her ability to get into these positions that she is utterly unqualified for by basically guile and deceit.
Yeah, and that actress, of course, she just sucks you into it, right? She just pulls you in and makes it feel so real.
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder, do you think that in Kai Winn's mind, she passed the test from the prophets?
Oh, that's a good point.
I mean, we talked about, does she even really believe that there is a test? I think she does, but, you know, do you think she passed? I think she's going to tell herself that she did, that this was the best thing for Bajoran. She found the best candidate.
100%. I think that she has an amazing ability to make anything match what she wants to.
Agreed.
So
she's going to try to find out and manipulate him now. Just move on to the next one.
Yes. And I think she would justify this with simply saying, oh, well, the prophets didn't want me to follow this path.
Right. That's not what they wanted for me. They want me to be the spiritual leader. Yeah.
I passed their test, which was to find a new path.
Right. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, I think her ability to justify anything would be remarkable.
Yes. Unparalleled. I would say that's her unparalleled strength. I do worry about how angry Kira continues to make Winn, because she is scary.
Yes. Well,
though I guess at the same time, Kira's been able to kind of get the upper hand, yet still try and help Winn in the name of Bajor. So I don't know. She probably still sees her as a tool that she can use. Yeah. But at some point, those lies are going to stop working. Hopefully from here, they stop working.
Right. So hopefully from here, Kira's learned you can't give her the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, hopefully.
I would also worry about Winn encouraging some fundamentalist to kill Kira.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it's very dangerous to get on her bad side so much.
I never told her to attempt to kill Kira. It just happened.
Well, that's the danger of a leader like that.
Yeah.
She can say things and it ends up being taken so seriously by someone else, someone who's maybe a little deranged or someone who isn't capable of making good decisions on their own. And they take that as direction and go off and do something very bad.
Right. Yes.
I think my last overanalysis point is, I think it's so interesting that Sisko just lets Kira turn into a fugitive and then just come back to work like nothing happened. The rules of this partnership are murky at best.
I like the fact that he did that.
Well, he had to. He had no choice.
I wonder if some of the rationale for that falls under the Prime Directive. Of this was an internal Bajoran matter. Kira was involved in that internal Bajoran matter. I can't really ding her for it or take any action against her or even criticize her for it.
Yeah, she wasn't charged with anything, so I guess that makes sense. It was an internal affair at Bajor.
Right.
Okay,
and
that makes sense.
To an extent, you know, Kira was the person who stopped this becoming a civil war. As I said earlier, she was the one who, I think, saw the bigger picture, or understood the bigger picture. Whereas the Colonel was focused on doing his orders and finding these people. And Shakaar was straight back to that resistance fighter of, I'm fighting the man for the good of the Bajoran people, for the good of my people. And in some ways, it's like Kira has learned from Sisko, learned from the people around her, and learned from experiences. Her take on this is she goes straight to the strategic implications, not the tactical implications.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really loved that scene when the resistance fighter leaders met.
Yes.
And came to their own new conclusion, what was best for Bajor. I thought that was a really great scene.
Right.
With the supermodel with the hair.
I think that must have been a directing choice to keep him looking that way and everyone else looking a little bit bedraggled.
Oh, that's funny. Well, that's my last overanalysis point, so I'll just go to women in the future. I don't have a lot to say here. I mean, Kira, tough as nails. I like to see that. I have no real complaints here about the treatment of women in this episode, which, makes for a nice change.
Yeah.
So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Just solid episode on so many levels.
I agree. Thumbs up. Really like this episode. I really liked Shakaar. It's hard for me to dislike anything with Kai Winn in it because she's amazing.
Yes.
And the B story was dopey and pointless. If at the end they had actually let us know that they were tricking Quark, then I would have probably said, okay, now I get the B story. But they didn't do that. And so instead, it's like, why did we keep going back to it? I don't know. It was like a little comic relief, I guess, when the rest of the episode was so serious.
Right. Yeah. I would love to have seen at the end Miles and Bashir clink glasses and, Miles wink at Bashir.
Yeah, just even a little wink would have been funny. Yeah, absolutely. But doesn't matter. This was a very good episode, and I really liked it. So thumbs up.
Yay.
Okay, that brings us to the end of Season 3, Episode 24. Come back next week for Episode 25. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at Rebingeit. You can also check us out on talkthroughmedia.com, where you can give feedback on individual episodes, and you can also check out the other podcasts on our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.